Well, good morning. Um, Today I'd like to do a study on Revelations 13, uh, the first part of it about the first beast that rises up out of the sea with the seven heads and 10 horns. There's a lot of thoughts and ideas about what this is and what this means and stuff like that. So I'd like to go over what I believe the Bible says about this. Now, one thing that I do, especially studying prophecy, but with anything really, is I try to find either an example in the Bible or other verses that talk about the same thing in some kind of way so that I can compare and let the Bible interpret itself. Um, what I don't do, especially with prophecy, is I don't superimpose on the Bible some predetermined doctrine or eschatology, which is a study of last things or the end times, uh, and then interpret prescriptions according to that, like a formula. Like I say, I just try to let the Bible speak for itself in the Holy Spirit, who's our teacher. And one thing I do is I try to use a word for word translation. I'll be coming out of the King James, which is translated word for word. Now, some people don't like the King James or whatever, but let me tell you why I do it. There are basically three types of translations, and one is a word for word or formal equivalence, what they call it, and that means that when they translate a verse from the original languages, they try to just do one word at a time. Whatever this word means, try to find a word in English that's equivalent to that. Sometimes you can't do that, and you got to use a little bit of thought for thought, which is the second means. Sometimes you have to add a word or two, and usually they're in italics to let you know this was added to bring out the meaning of the word, because it just doesn't come across in English the exact same way. The second type of translation is thought for thought, and what that is, and that's where you read a passage and you try to think, well, let's see, this could be interpreted different ways, but Peter was writing to Jews, and so if he was talking to Jews, what would he mean when he said this? What did Jews think about this? And what are the definitions of this word in Greek or whatever back then? And you put all this stuff together and you try to get the thought. But the thing about that is you have a little more bias in that type of interpretation, because it's going to be according to my view. Messianics may do it a little different than Baptists, and somebody else may view it a little different, whatever. Depending on what their doctrine and denomination and stuff is, they're going to not interpret certain words if they have several meanings to go against what they think what their doctrine is, right? And God helps us with that, because the Bible's recorded in two languages, and you got what's called hard words and soft words. Hard words usually have like one or two meanings. Soft words have multiple meanings, right? And so a lot of times you'll have things that are translated with a soft word that are actually quotes from the Old Testament. In the Old Testament, the Hebrew equivalent word is a hard word, so it means what it says, or vice versa, right? You might have an Old Testament passage that has a soft word, and it could mean all kinds of things, but then it's used in the New Testament with a hard word, and so you know what it means, because the Bible interprets itself. And so that's easier to see whenever you're using a word for word than a thought for thought, because it's word by word, right? And also, words are usually translated the same way without a lot of different input, like with a thought for thought. The third type of translation is a paraphrase, and it's basically just somebody explaining it according to what they say, so it's really far down the line. So, but all three have to have input from the translator, of course, but the further you get from word for word, the more room there is for that type of input, and the more room there is for that type of input to be wrong. But the other reason that I do this is because the King James, you can take a concordance. A Strong's Concordance has every single word, English word in this Bible in it, and you can look at it and see the Greek or the Hebrew words behind that word, and you can follow the Hebrew word throughout the whole Old Testament. You can follow that Greek word throughout the whole New Testament, and let the context of how it's used define the word itself. And it also helps you study thematically, because a word in a thought for thought or a paraphrase might be translated way different in another passage than in a passage you're reading, but it's the same word and you don't know it because the English words are different. That's especially true when it comes to prophecy, where the meaning is symbolic and stuff, and so someone who translated might not have understood the meaning of the prophecy or whatever, and so they wouldn't think that. And so when they do their dynamic equivalent translation, they use other words than was used last time, and so you can't use a concordance and say, hey, this might go with this word because it's the same word. You can't do that. So anyway, that's why I use that, and that's why I'm using the King James, especially because it also goes with the Strong's. It has every word in it. You can do it. You do your own study and figure all this stuff out. Okay, now that that's out of the way, we'll go to Revelation 13. But anyway, I said that because a lot of people don't like the King James because it's a little bit harder to read with a little bit older English in it. There's a lot of arguments against it and for it and stuff like that, and I've studied all that, but I'm not going to get into that in this video. All right, so Revelations 13. We're only going to do like the first 7 verses of this, and or 8 verses or so of this, but we're going to do it a little at a time. We're going to go around in the Bible and see what these passages might be talking about, okay? So starting in verse 1, I'm going to read the first 2 verses. And I stood upon the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard. His feet were the feet of a bear, and his mouth was the mouth of a lion, and the dragon gave him his power, seat, and great authority. Amen. Okay, so this beast rises up out of the sea, right? And he has 7 heads, 10 horns, and 10 crowns upon his horns, right? He has a mouth of a lion, body of a leopard, and the feet of a bear. And the dragon gives him his power, right? So what do these heads represent? What is all this? Is this a person? Is this countries? What is this? We're going to see all that in the Bible, okay? But before we go to that, let's look at the dragon that gave him its power. Just go back a chapter to chapter 12 in Revelations. And we're going to look at verses 3, 4, and 9, okay? Verse 3 says, And there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads, 10 horns, and 7 crowns on his heads. Now, these crowns are on the heads and not the horns, and there's only 7, okay? And his tail drew a third part of the stars of heaven. Everybody usually believes that this is the angels he deceived and threw out of heaven, and cast him to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman, and who was ready to be delivered, and to devour her child as soon as it was born. Now, there's different interpretations of this, but this is Israel who it's talking about, and the child to be born that it wants to devour is Jesus. Remember the babies being killed in Bethlehem? And up here in verse 1 it says, There appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, the moon was under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. Well, if you look in Genesis 37:9, Joseph had a dream with the sun, the moon, and stars all bowing down to him, and his father interpreted that dream and said that shall him, his mother, and his mother was already dead at the time, is what's funny, him, his mother, and his brothers bow down to him. Israel, the 12 tribes, that's the 12 stars, okay? And you can also look in Micah 4:10, 5:3. But anyway, so this is Israel, and the devil's going to devour a child as soon as it is born, kills all the babies. All right, verse 9. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan. So the dragon is Satan, okay? And his kingdom has 7 heads, 7 crowns, and 10 horns also, okay? But it's red. The beast is red. The body's red. It's not like a leopard, okay? But the colors have certain significance, and we're going to see that in just a second. I think I'll try to make a chart or something, put it up here for the heads and the crowns and all that stuff. But for now, let's go to Daniel chapter 7. Excuse me. And while we're over here, I may jump back to Revelations to show you something, or we may do it later. I'm not sure how to come out. But if I do, you don't have to go. All right, Daniel chapter 7. We're going to start in verse 1, and we're going to do 8 verses. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream and visions in his head upon his bed, and then he wrote the dream and told the sum of the matters. Daniel spoke and said, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, 4 winds of heaven strove upon the great sea. Now, this is one of the places I was talking about. I might stop. Okay, in Revelations, in chapter 17, you got whore Babylon sitting upon many waters, and then it tells you that the waters are the nations, the people, tongues, right? And so the water, the sea that these beasts rise out of in Revelations 13:1, that beast rose out of the sea also. So there's going to be these 4 beasts come up out of the sea here that Daniel's going to see. The sea is the sea of humanity. It's people. The 4 winds, you can look at verses Revelation 7:1, Jeremiah 49:36, Zechariah 6:5, Revelation 17:15, and surrounding verses. And you'll see that these 4 winds are like spiritual forces that blow upon the earth, that blow upon the sea humanity. They cause trouble, they stir up strife, plagues, whatever it is, war, whatever's going on. These 4 forces, like the four horsemen kind of in a way, blow up on the sea of humanity, and out of the sea rise these beasts as men try to deal with these problems or whatever, right? Anyway, that's the imagery, that these winds are blowing on the sea. And then verse 3. And four great beasts came up out of the sea, diverse from one another. The first was like a lion, remember the mouth of a lion? And he had eagle's wings, and I beheld till the wings were plucked, and it was lifted up from the earth and made to stand upon its feet as a man, and a man's heart was given to it. Now what that's talking about, if you go and read chapter 3, I'm not going to do it just for time. Nebuchadnezzar was made to become like a beast, like an animal, and he ate straw and grass and stuff like that, like an ox would, for 7 years, until he looked up and acknowledged that God was God and he ran things and not Nebuchadnezzar, right? And when he did that, he was raised back, he was given his sanity back. So he went from being an antichrist, an evil man, killing people for not worshiping the statue that he made and all this stuff, to a person acknowledging God. He actually wrote chapter 3, okay, of Daniel. And so he acknowledges God as God of gods and all that. So that's when his wings were plucked off. He went from being a beast to a man. All right, but we're also going to see that these beasts represent not just the king of it, or the first king, but also the country that they run, okay, and any other successive kings. All right, but anyway, all right, so the first was like a lion. Verse 5. And I beheld another beast, a second beast like a bear. In Revelations, the feet of a bear, remember? And it was raised up on one side, and it had 3 ribs in its mouth between the teeth of it. And they said to it, arise and devour much flesh. It's raised up on one side. What this is, and we'll see another example of this in chapter 8, what it is Babylon was conquered by Persia and Media. They joined together in an alliance. And one side is raised up because Cyrus, king of Persia, his armies and his nation and stuff was bigger than the Medians, okay? And he was more exalted. And so he's raised up. He had 3 ribs in his mouth because he had to conquer Babylon, Lydia, and Egypt in order to rule that area. So those are the 3 ribs that he devoured, okay? And after this, I beheld, this is verse 6, and lo, another like a leopard, Revelations, the body of a leopard, which had upon its back 4 wings of a fowl, and the beast had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. Now this is a little bit different than Revelation, but I want you to notice, there's 4 heads on this beast, right? And there's been 3 beasts before it. 2 beasts before it. I can't count. So altogether that's 6 heads, and then there's going to be one more that has 10 horns, okay? So that's 7 heads, 10 horns, same thing. All right, verse 7. After this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible, strong exceedingly, and it had great iron teeth, and it devoured and brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with the feet thereof, and it was diverse from all beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn, and over here it says that it actually came up after the 10. Well, I want to read through the whole chapter to figure out where it is. Anyway, it says it comes up after the 10 horns. Right, okay, it's verse 24. The 10 kings, the 10 horns out of this kingdom were 10 kings, and another shall rise after them, and to be first from the others, and he'll subdue 3 kings, right? So back to verse 8. I'm start at the beginning again. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up another little horn, before whom 3 of the first horns were plucked up by the roots, and behold, in this horn were the eyes like the eyes of a man, and the mouth speaking great things, just like the one in Revelation that did a bunch of blasphemy. Okay, so that's the Antichrist, okay? So the 10 horns are going to rise. The 10 horns are 10 kings. The 10 horns are going to rise, and another's going to rise after them, which is going to be the Antichrist, okay? All right, now what these 4 beasts represent is Babylon, who was then conquered by Media Persia. That's the 2nd beast, right? The one like a leopard is Alexander the Great, Greece, coming in, and then Rome conquers Greece. So it's a succession, okay? Has 7 heads and 10 horns. Just like Satan's kingdom, 7 heads and 10 horns, but only 7 crowns, right? It's the same thing. Nebuchadnezzar in chapter 2 had a dream, and Daniel reveals a dream to him, and there's those 5 aspects. There was a head of gold. Well, let's just go look at it. It doesn't use beasts, but it's still the same nations, okay? All right, verse 31. We're not going to read all the beginning, just the interpretation. in the dream itself. You, O king, saw and beheld a great image, and this great image, whose brightness was excellent, stood before you, and the form was terrible. The image's head was of gold, and his breast and his arms were silver, and his belly and thighs of brass, and his legs of iron, and his feet part iron and part clay. So it goes all the way down and adds the feet. This is 5 different aspects, right? You got what? The head of gold, the breast and arms, silver, belly and thighs of brass, legs, iron, feet, clay. The fourth beast, Rome, also had iron teeth and iron claws, remember. All right. Verse 34. You saw till the stone was cut without hands, and smote the image on the feet that were iron and clay, and broke them into pieces. Right? And so then the stone that breaks it grows up into a mountain, fills the whole earth. All right, so over here he's going to give the interpretation of this dream. Verse 37. You, O king, are a king of kings, for God of heaven has given you a kingdom, power, strength, and glory. And wheresoever the children of men dwell, the beasts of the field, and all the fowls of heaven, he has given into your hand, and has made you ruler over them all. You are this head of gold. But in the very next verse we're going to see it's also the kingdom, the king and the kingdom. And after thee shall rise another kingdom, inferior to thee, silver. Gold is superior to silver. Inferior to thee, and in the third kingdom of brass, which shall rule over the earth, and a fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron. This is Rome. Forasmuch as iron breaks into pieces and subdues all things, and iron breaks all these, and it shall break into pieces and bruise. So it overcomes all these other kingdoms. You know, they're left after they conquer each other, they're left, but Rome subdues everything. All right, whereas you saw the feet and the toes were part potter's clay and part iron, the kingdom shall be divided, but there shall be the strength of iron in it. For as much as you saw the iron mixed with clay, as the toes and the feet were part iron and part clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly divided. And whereas you saw the iron mixed with the miry clay, they shall mingle themselves together with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave to one another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. I'm not going to go into that aspect, but the 10 kings are all going to turn on each other, and the result is Armageddon. Verse 44. And in those days, in the days of these kings, these 10, the 10 toes, the 10 horns, in the days of these kings, shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left for another people, but it shall break into pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. Amen. Even so, come Lord Jesus. All right, so I just want you to kind of see from these things that these heads are these successive kingdoms. If we go back to Revelations, yeah, let's do that. Let's go back to Revelation. Let's go to chapter 17. We're going to start in verse 9. All right. John sees a vision of Babylon, the harlot, the great whore, the anti-church, Satan's whore. The church is Christ's bride. Babylon is Satan's whore, right? He sees her riding a beast that has 7 heads and 10 horns and a scarlet-colored body. So it doesn't have the leopard and all those other aspects, but it has 7 heads, 10 horns. It's scarlet, it's satanic, okay? And as we already seen a while ago when I showed you Revelations 12, how Satan's kingdom had these same things. Just like the one on earth, the earthly beast is a reflection of Satan's beast. It's the dragon. They're a reflection of each other because his kingdom controls that kingdom. All right? So verse 9, I should have showed you that in Daniel 2 while we're there. We're going to go to that next. All right, in verse 9 it says, here's the mind that has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits, and there are 7 kings. 5 are fallen, 1 is, and the other is not yet come. And when he comes, he must continue a short space. Now what this is telling us about the 7 heads, what they are. 5 are fallen. John wrote this in probably around 96 AD. So 5 are fallen. These are nations that have persecuted Israel. Those 4 nations in Daniel persecuted Israel. This is the same thing, but it's going to go back and start with Egypt, okay, instead of starting with Babylon. And Daniel started with where they were at and went forward. But Greece had 4 heads. This doesn't do that. This just leaves Greece alone as 1 head. So the 5 that are fallen in John's day are Egypt, where they were slaves, Assyria, who conquered the northern kingdom and took them away, Babylon, who conquered Judah and took them away to captivity, and then the Medes and the Persians, then Greece. They all fell, and Greece was conquered by Rome, the one that is. 5 are fallen, 1 is, right? The one yet to come is the kingdom that's built by the 10 horns that are going to give their power to the beast. Now, In Daniel, it says the 10 horns, in their day, Jesus is going to set up his kingdom, the 1,000-year reign, right? But one comes after them that's going to subdue 3 of them. He's going to run them, right? We'll look at the next verse here. It's going to be kind of the same thing. So in verse 10, we had 7 kings, right? 5 fallen, one is yet to come. And then verse 11 says, and the beast that was and is not, even he is the 8th. And he is of the 7, and he goes to perdition. So just like of the 10, one came after and subdued 3, well, of the 7, one comes after, and he is the 8th, and of the 7, right? It's the both of those are referring to the Antichrist. It's saying he's from these groups, from these people, but he comes after them, and then he does whatever, right? Verse 12. And the 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings, just like in Daniel, the 10 horns were 10 kings, which have received no kingdom yet, but they received power as kings 1 hour with the beast. We'll see in a minute, back in chapter 13, they reigned 42 months with him, which is 3.5 years. These have one mind and shall give their power and their strength to the beast, and these shall make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb shall overcome them, for he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and they that are with him are called, chosen, and faithful. And he said to me, the waters, this is what I quoted earlier, the waters which you saw where the horse sits are peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. And the 10 horns that you saw upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, Babylon, false religion, Satan's whore. And these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate, naked, and shall eat her flesh, and burn her with fire. For God has put it into their hearts to fulfill his will, and to agree, and to give their kingdom unto the beast, until the words of God be fulfilled. To the Antichrist, okay? Let's see. All right, let's go back to Revelations 13. Oh, no, I wanted to show you that the principalities in Daniel. So go to Daniel 10, and then we'll go to Revelations 13 again. In Daniel 10, God gives us a glimpse behind the curtains. Remember, Satan's beast, the dragon, had 7 heads, 10 horns, and 7 crowns, right? And then the earthly kingdom had 7 heads, 10 horns, and 10 crowns, right? But other than that, in the colors of the bodies, it's a reflection of the other, and I'm going to show you why now. All right, in Daniel 10, we're going to start in verse 2. Daniel had been receiving these visions and stuff, and they were confusing to him. He didn't understand them. In one place, even in chapter 12, I think, God tells him to seal it up. It's not for you to know. In the time of the end, they'll understand, right? And so he's confused about this. So he begins to pray to God and fast for an answer, and this goes on for 3 weeks. All right, starting in verse 2. In those days, I, Daniel, was mourning for 3 full weeks. I ate no present bread, neither flesh nor wine came into my mouth, neither did I anoint myself with oil till 3 whole weeks were fulfilled. All right, so he's doing this for 3 weeks, and then this angel comes to him. Let's skip down to where him and the angel are talking. Verse 12. And then the angel's talking, says, then he said to me, fear not, Daniel, for from the first day that you set your heart to understand and chasten yourself before God, your words were heard, and I am come for your words. So Daniel began to pray about all this stuff. Help me understand what's going on, God. And from that moment, God sends this angel. But listen, verse 13. But the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me for 21 days. 21 days, those 3 weeks. But lo, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, and I remained there with the kings of Persia, and now I'm come to you to make you understand. Okay, so this angel is dispatched to come help, or come answer this prayer that Daniel's praying. But the prince of Persia, where's Daniel at? He's in Persia. Rises up and withstands against this angel for 21 days. They're fighting or whatever they're doing. He can't get through. And then Michael, and if you flip over to chapter 12, verse 1, it says, at that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince which stands for the children of your people. Michael is the prince of Israel. Like this guy's a prince of Persia, Michael's a prince of Israel. So God sends this angel to come talk to Daniel, and the prince of Persia stands up and fights him, and he can't get through it. So God sends Michael, Israel's prince, to help. And together they overcome this guy, get him out the way so this angel can come to Daniel. Now skip down to verse 20. Then this is the angel talking to Daniel again. Then he said, do you know wherefore I have come to you? And now I will return to fight with the prince of Persia. And when I am gone forth, lo, the prince of Greece shall come. So here's what happens. The Michael comes to help. He gets away, goes here. So Michael and the Prince of Persia are still doing their thing. And then he goes back to help Michael. And they overcome the Prince of Persia. Well, what country destroys or conquers Persia? Greece, right? Greece comes, and Alexander the Great. And we see this over here in chapter 8. This is one of the things that Daniel had been seeing. And he's praying about answers to these things. In chapter 8, let's start in verse 3. This is Daniel talking. And then I lifted up my eyes, and I saw, and behold, there stood before the river a ram that had 2 horns. This is Persian Media, which we'll see in a second. But remember, I was telling you, the bear was lifted up on one side, Persian Media. They conquered Babylon. All right. I lifted up my eyes, and I saw, and behold, there stood before the river a ram which had 2 horns, and the 2 horns were high, but one was higher than the other, just like one shoulder of the bear. And the higher came up last. And I saw the ram pushing westward and northward and southward, so that no beast might stand before him, neither was there any that could deliver out of his hand, but he did according to his will and became great. And as I was considering, behold, a he-goat came from the west, from the face of the whole earth, touching not the ground. It means he's moving very fast. His feet ain't even touching the ground, his hooves. And the goat had a notable horn between his eyes. This is Alexander the Great, and it'll tell us that in just a second. And he came into the ram with the 2 horns that I had seen standing before the river, and he ran into him in the fury of his power. So he breaks his horns off, beats him, crushes him down, he's gone, right? And then it says, go ahead and read this before we interpret it. Verse 8, therefore the goat waxed very great, and when he was strong, the great horn was broken, and for it came 4 notable horns toward the 4 corners of heaven. Alexander the Great died in the prime of all this, and his 4 generals took over, and they split his kingdom into 4 parts, right? So skip down right to where the angel interprets it, verse 20. The ram that you saw having 2 horns are the kings of Media and Persia, and the rough he-goat is the king of Grecia, and the great horn that is between his eyes is its first king, Alexander the Great. Now that being broken, whereas stood up 4 the 4 kingdoms shall stand up out of his nation, but not in his power, right? So they were split into 4 parts. So that's why the leopard had 4 heads. His 4 generals split his country up after he died. So all that goes together and shows you that these heads are these kings and these nations, right? Satan had the same thing. He had the prince of Persia and then the prince of Greece. Whenever Michael and this angel talking to Daniel overcome the prince of Persia, the prince of Greece come. Alexander is the earthly prince of Greece, and they overcome Persia because the principality, spiritual king of Persia, has already been overcome by Michael and this other angel. So you see how this kind of works? All right, so that's one is a reflection of the other. The principalities and stuff in the heavens, they're reflected in the earthly kingdom on earth because the dragon is Satan's kingdom. All right, back to Revelation 13, finally. 28 minutes so far. I do a lot of talking, I guess. I guess I could have put a piece of paper in here, huh? Alright, so we read verse 1 and 2, and then we understand the lion, the bear, and all that. Alright, now the deadly wound, verses 3 and 4. And I saw one of his heads. Now what are the heads? I saw one of its heads as it was wounded to death, and the deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. And they worshipped the dragon, which gave power to the beast, and they worshipped the beast, saying, who is like the beast, and who is able to make war with him? So they worshipped him, and what they said when they worshipped him is, who is like the beast, and who is able to make war with him, right? Because his deadly wound was healed. So what is that deadly wound? So let's go to Ezekiel 30. See, I try to let the Bible, I'm not dismissing that there may not, the Antichrist or somebody may not get wounded or even killed and come back, maybe as an AI image of himself and not really him, and they're tricking us with AI or any of those things. I'm just disqualifying that because prophecies also often have a double meaning, right? And just like the beast's head, the beast in Daniel might be the king or the nation, the heads are the same way. All right. Anyway, back in Daniel, chapter 11. We're going to go to Ezekiel first, right? Ezekiel 30. My bad. I'm sorry. If you went to Daniel 11, just hold your finger in it. All right, we're going to go to verse 24, and then we're going to back up and read from 21 down to 24 again. This is the only other place in the Bible where the deadly wound is used, and this is what I was talking about by the translations. If another translation might not read a deadly wound. All right. Anyway, verse 24, and I will strengthen. This is God talking. I will strengthen the arms of the king of Babylon, and I will put my sword in his hand, and I will break Pharaoh's arms, and he will groan before him, the king of Babylon, with groanings of a deadly wounded man. So what makes him groan with the wound of a deadly wounded man? Having his arms broken. What does that mean? Let's back up to 21. Son of man, I have broken the arm of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and lo, it shall not be bound up or healed, to put a roller to bind it, to make it strong, to hold a sword. A sword, God put his sword in the king of Babylon's hand. The sword is the ability to make war, okay? To fight and to overcome. That's what the sword is, okay? So he broke Pharaoh's arm and made him drop his sword, and God put his sword into the hand of the king of Babylon to overcome him. All right? Verse 21 again. And son of man, I have broken the arm of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, and lo, it shall not be bound up to be healed. The Antichrist's deadly wound will be healed. To put a roller to bind it, to make it strong, to hold the sword. It's a big clue right there. Therefore, thus says the Lord God, behold, I am against Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and I will break his arms, the strong and that which was broken, and I will cause the sword to fall out of his hand. And I will scatter the Egyptians among the nations, and I will disperse them through the countries, and I will strengthen the arms of the king of Babylon, and I will put my sword in his hand, and I will break Pharaoh's arms, and he shall groan before him with the groanings of a deadly wounded man. Now jump over to Daniel 11:15. We're going to read this, and then we're going to jump over to 36 in the same chapter. So the king of the north shall come and cast up a mount and take the fenced cities, and the arms of the south shall not withstand, neither his chosen people, neither shall be any strength to withstand. So the ability to fight, to withstand, is in the arms. The arms hold the sword. Their sword is not able to overcome the king of the north. Let's go to verse 36. And the king shall do according to his will, and he shall exalt himself and magnify himself above every god. Remember in Thessalonians, the Antichrist, it says he shall exalt himself above all that is called God, showing himself that he is God, sitting in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. So he exalts himself above all gods. He doesn't say, I am Jehovah, Jesus, I'm the creator of heaven and earth. Like if you saw the movie 300, where he said he's a God because what? Your life was in his hand to do with what he wanted. That's the kind of sense that they're saying this, okay? But anyway, back up again, 36. And the king shall do according to his will, and he shall exalt himself and magnify himself above every god, and shall speak marvelous things against the God of gods. The beast in Revelation blasphemies God. And he shall prosper till the indignation be accomplished, for that shall be determined, shall be done. Neither shall he regard the God of his fathers, nor the desire of women, nor any God, for he shall magnify himself above all. But in his estate he shall honor the God of forces, a God of his fathers knew not. Forces there, the Hebrew word for that means might, fortress. It's a person's might. It's their strength, their arms, their defense. That's what that word's talking about. Okay, in some places the word is used like God is our defense, right? God is that. But here it's not. He honors a God of force, of military might is what he's talking about. This is all talking about military might. Pharaoh's military might was the sword. God broke his arms, he dropped the sword, and that was the wound of a deadly wounded man. Okay, the Antichrist is going to be the same way. But the wound received the head. What that's talking about, if all that's true about the sword, the deadly wound, the sword being the military might, and all that, and him honoring a God that's military might, and remember when they worship the beast, they say who is like unto him and who is able to make war with him. It's this power, the sword in his hand, right? And just like God put the sword in Babylon's hand, God's going to put the sword in his hand to punish the world, right? And that's military might. So if that's what the resurrection is, what was the deadly wound? Was dropping that sword. And that was when the Roman Empire fell. The 10 horns come out of the Roman Empire in Daniel. And the legs are iron, and they go down to the feet and the 10 toes, right? And they're part iron, part clay. They come out of the Roman Empire. The Western world, and even much of Russia and those areas, a lot of our culture, our laws, the way we do things, we inherited from the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire changed the world. You know, the Greeks unified language, started unifying language across the world. But the Romans joined all the nations together with their roads and with trade and stuff like that, like never before, right? And so all that come together. And if you remember in Ezekiel, when it talks about Satan, it's his traffic, his trade, that how he did his stuff with the people. All right. So the deadly wound in Revelations that is healed is they call it the resurrected Roman Empire, stuff like that. It's not going to be the Roman Empire. It's going to be the 10 kings. The 10 kings are going to give their pledge, their power to the Antichrist. And boom, the arm is resurrected, the head is resurrected. The deadly wound that no longer had a sword is now given the sword again to persecute the earth and to do all the things he's going to do. All right, that's what the deadly wound is talking about. But like I said, I don't discount completely in my mind that there could something like that happen to a person, because we know in part, we prophesy in part, and all that. Okay, so we don't understand completely. We have to watch for a lot of these things and see how they unfold. But it's good to be aware of how they can unfold. All right, verse 5. And there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and power was given unto him to continue 42 months, 3.5 years, the 1 hour that in chapter 17, the 1 hour that the 10 kings reigned with the beast. And he opened his mouth and he blasphemed against God. Remember it said in Daniel? And he blasphemed his name, his tabernacle, and those that dwell in heaven. And it was given to him to make war with the saints and to overcome them, and power was given him over all kindreds, tongues, and nations, the many waters. And all that dwell on the earth shall worship him, whose names are not written in the book of life from the Lamb, slain from the foundation of the world. If any man have ears to hear, let him hear. So, in conclusion, this beast rising up out of the sea is like a composite beast of the 7 kingdoms that have persecuted Israel in the world, that are a reflection of Satan's kingdom. But they're kind of there's aspects out of every one of these nations, every one of these things are all bound together through these 10 kings and the Antichrist. So it's like it has aspects of all 7 kingdoms in that. But its might, it doesn't have might to rule the world, to be an empire, a worldwide empire, until the 10 kings give their power unto the beast, and then the sword is put back in his hand, and so his deadly wound is healed. According to Ezekiel, the deadly wound is, the sword in the hand. We went through that. All right, so that's my interpretation. That's my conclusion. Oh, almost forgot. I wrote a book. It's called Everything in Perspective, From Adam to Antichrist. It goes over all this. It starts off and gives a story from Genesis, how it all began, and then through the kings and all that, all the history of the Bible. And then it does church history and then prophecy. And it's showing you how that from Adam all the way to the Antichrist, it's been one single plan of God. And if you understand that and you look at it from that perspective, it helps the pieces fit into that plan easier than thinking, like some people think, God made Adam, Adam sinned, oops, what's plan B? It's never been like that. From the beginning, Christ was foreordained to come and save us, okay? And all of this is about Christ. And remember, the very first prophecy in the Bible is that Satan's head is going to get bruised by Jesus' heel. And this is what's going on here. If you go read Revelation 19, that's when that goes down completely, right? There was on the cross for sure, but he's going to smash them right there, and Satan's going to be thrown into the pit for 1,000 years and all that. But anyway, so my book is on Amazon, along with some fantasy novels and stuff I wrote that are from a Christian perspective as well. But you can't tell too much unless you're a Christian. You'll recognize stuff as the series progresses. But I had some other scriptures in here, stuff to look at, and we could look at the rest of that, but this video is already 38 minutes long, so I'm just going to stop with that and leave you with you. God bless.